Morning, afternoon, good night. Welcome. I'm Ethan Catch. I'm very pleased to be moderating this book launch for Amy and Jan. Uh, this is an event that I've been looking forward to, and I hope we can have enough time to let all of you ask any questions you like. But we'll start off with about 20 minutes or a half hour of slides that Amy brought that'll explain everything. And if it does explain everything, we won't have any questions, but I'm sure it won't explain everything. I would like to mention before we start that this is not our only book that we're welcoming this year. I don't know how to hold this up that it will be seen, but this is Leah Wing's book, Governing AI, and it's out recently, and it's a great book, and I hope you'll take a look at it. Um, Colin, you want to say anything about the ODR forum that the NCTDR sponsors, or hold off on that?
Sure do. No, we're having the ODR Forum at Harvard this year. It's going to be June 11th. The website should be live soon. We've confirmed the Rubenstein Treehouse on the Harvard campus. And the day after, there's going to be a conference on AI resolutions at Suffolk Law School. So it should be a great event. I'm going to send out all the information soon once I get all of the deposits in and dates confirmed. So stay tuned, and I hope you can join us in Cambridge. It's going to be a great forum, and it'll be even better with you there.
Okay, that's great. Amy, I'm looking for you.
Oh, wait, I just had a little snafu here. As one does when they're, believe it or not, my Zoom decided it wanted to update, which always is the perfect timing. And fix this real quick. And here we go. All right, so first of all, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time in their afternoon today. We're really pleased and so thankful to Leah and Ethan for hosting this. Let me just also note about Leah's new book that we are featuring it in our next column that Bill Froelich and I do for mediation with the ANI Flipped, which is our new column that we have with the American Arbitration Association. So stay tuned for that. Pretty excited. So really excited also that Jan is here with me, partner in crime on this book. So I'm going to kind of whiz through a bunch of the slides because there's way too many and we want to get to the good stuff, which is conversation. So why this book matters. So obviously AI has become very large and really is transforming dispute resolution. We highly cite Ethan and Jan Rifkin in discussing the fourth party and how technology has really become the fourth party in dispute resolution. And we kind of take it to the next level in thinking about it, as a tool in the toolbox within a system design approach, which thank goodness I'm working with the expert, Jan Martinez, on the system design aspects. The other thing we really focus on is, innovation paradox, the way that technology both creates and can help resolve conflicts. We think very deeply about human roles. Are they in the loop, on the loop, out of the loop? And system design. These are foundational within this book. This, obviously, we didn't come up with it. This is actually from many others where we've seen the same graphic. And really, where is the human in all of this? And it's particularly important in dispute prevention and resolution that we keep the human in the loop, is what we argue. We also really think about how we integrate AI from a very multimodal perspective within the system design framework, first put forth with Jan Martinez and her colleagues. So with that, I'm actually going to pass the baton to the expert, which is Jan Martinez.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everyone. This is great to spend this time together. I think nearly all of you have been at one of our system design, either to review our previous book and or to think about how that plays out in a world of increasing technology. So I won't, so I'll just briefly remind us what the fundamentals were of system design, that when you're looking at a system of dispute resolution, the processes that you put together to either prevent, intervene early and prevent, to manage in process, or resolve if you are in a formal system. So really thinking about a system, and with the introduction of technology, how much more complicated that becomes, richer, but also more complicated. And firstly, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to do something faster, more accessible, more voice sensitive? That those issues are, what are the goals? And unless you know what your goals are and you keep your eye on that ball, it becomes very difficult to know if you are making progress and if you are evaluating the effectiveness of your processes and the system. Second, thinking about who cares, who's affected by this realm of dispute or conflict. And I think the introduction of technology really increases the complexity, but also the resourcing of who's involved in identifying and resolving conflict. So and we think in this context, tech developers, and bringing in not just the lawyers and the legal perspective, but that we're looking at a lot of other parties who are bringing richer resources and more understanding. So the tech developers, not just the neutrals, case managers, the parties, and the regulatory authorities, but we're also bringing government at local and highest levels and international levels. Thinking about the context in the culture, certainly the culture of technology is a richer one, but makes it a lot more complicated and much more uneven. So the different stakeholders, we not just have someone, Jan or Amy or Carrie, bringing dispute resolution to the party, but we are also looking at agents and AI agents for every one of those stakeholders we already had. And so that we have a two-level game, at least, if not more. The procedures and processes ranging from negotiating through third-party processes, mediation, adjudication, and now AI bots. And so really thinking about the different processes and how they're filtered through the different technologies. Let's see. Resources are becoming even more important. We were concerned about financial and human and technology, but now that technology is also looking at energy and thinking the data centers and how does this introduce another layer of political, economic, and financial leverage. Transparency and accountability, monitoring, evaluating, learning over time. And so if all the multiple parties that we've identified and that emerge over time, are they involved, and who is involved in evaluating whether what we've designed is really being fully effective. So Amy really introduced the tools in the toolbox now that have really expanded our capacity in delivery.
So yeah, the first part of the book really sets those foundational concepts and really thinking through, okay, here's what we got. Here's the baseline. Here's the foundation of this building. System design, fourth party, human in the loop, all of these things that we sort of set the table. But then on top of that table, well, what are all these different tools in the toolbox? What are all the toys we now have to play with, in other words, right? And so we really go in piece by piece. We talk about obviously generative AI, but also legal RAG systems and expert systems, natural language processing, OCR, metaverse, blockchain. We really introduce each of these tools. And now we also include agentic AI as well, which really came up as we were writing the book. We're like, ooh, another tool. And we know that this is not exhaustive, and we know there's going to be more tools, and there are more tools as we speak. Um, Next, we really bring in, okay, what do you do now? You've got the landscape, you have your foundation, we have these really powerful tools, right? And with great power comes great responsibility. So then we talk about the ways that we really use soft law and hard law, and how does that impact the use of technology, which becomes really important, especially as we think about for us as dispute resolution professionals, scholars, and policymakers. So, Jan, do you want to talk some about soft law versus hard law?
Sure. So most of us have been involved in some aspect of the soft law, really coming up with the ethical principles from the Bar Association, the locally with the Silicon Valley folks, iCoder with Colin, and really thinking about how do we identify all the different principles and guidelines that would be valuable to be responsible users and consumers of technology. And so the soft law has been building, and we're pleased to have been part, meaning NCTDR, have been pleased to be involved with identifying those and distributing them, and are really quite pleased with the ISO regulatory adoption of our work. So coming up in the book, we lay out all the different principles and guidelines that we can for a number of organizations, government, non-governmental, professional, all these different associations that are trying to guide us. So we've laid that out and identified those in cross-hatching how each of those can be involved and adopted. So the soft law uh, speaks for itself and is definitely growing and developing. The hard law, which is looking at the EU and their AI Act, is trying to make a more crisp and enforceable regulatory system. Concerns such as bias, transparency, privacy, security, yeah, all of these concerns are apparent, but really thinking about well, the triple, as an example, the AAA ICDR guidance on generative AI, the accuracy of information, party expectations, that each of those are ways of identifying some way of regulating our use and consumption of technology. And I think in the EU Commission, that might as well just touch on that for a second. The EU Commission has really come at regulatory structure by looking at, is there an unacceptable risk? In other words, prohibit. Is it high risk? Means regulate. Limited risk, a lot more flexible, and minimal risk then is more easily adoptable. So thinking about whether the EU, now that they've got this structure in place, can they enforce it? And there's a real struggle going on here. So within the US, the issues around hard law and regulation, which was really emerging at the state level, is now really is fraught, let's say, with an administration that is trying to favor the innovation and the business freedom to develop technology, as opposed to uh, uh, holding my thought here.
Yeah, no, and it's completely kind of a, Wild West in the US. And so you think through sort of, what's happening in Europe versus what's happening in the US, what's happening with soft law and hard law. And it was really fun, actually, I have to say, working with Jan is always fun. But just sitting there and really talking about, well, gosh, what do we take from all of this, right? Are there any themes? Are there strands? Are there pieces, threads that we can pull on, right? And think through, all right, well, what are our themes? And that was really important for our discussion and to bring all of this together in the book, right? To really help provide guidance for learners who are using the book. And when we thought through what are the big pieces, accountability, transparency, and explainability, also equal, fair, impartial, attention to privacy and security. Indeed, a lot of this dovetails very nice with the iCoder standards. And once again, check out the book on governing AI by Leah and everybody, because it really kind of dives more deeply into that. But these themes come in time and time again. So regardless of whether or not, the US really has, strong regulations, I do think there's a craving for regulation. And certainly as dispute resolution professionals, we are thinking about these systems, and are the systems ethical, and thinking through, so accountability, transparency, how does this play out within that system design? And I'm going to breeze through this so we can get to the good stuff, the discussion. But what I wanted to tell you about, so after we set the table, right? So we set the table, we put the plates and the forks and the knives with the tools and the law and try to get it all there. Well, what's the meal, right? How do we bring this all together? And so the second half of the book includes case studies. And we have 9 different case studies where we take everything that whatever we're selling, whatever we're putting down, now we're using it, right? So we are actually applying it to specific case studies. These are just few examples that we use. One is Utah's ODR system for small claims. So thinking through, okay, how do we use this digital dispute system design? So adding in technology to system design, adding in the regulatory and ethical concerns. How would a redesign, what would that look like? How has Utah followed and not followed these prescriptions that we're putting forth and ideas that we include? We also do a deep dive into co-parenting platforms. These really have proliferated in now times. It's very common with co-parenter, but then others, Our Family Wizard, many others that are now out there. So we take a few of those and we, once again, use everything that we put forth in the beginning of the book and then actually apply it. And then we have a little fun. We look at metaverse hearings in Colombia, and that's really fun. Is thinking about, okay, metaverse as another tool in the toolbox. Well, what does that mean? How did it play out? How did system design come into play or not come into play? How would redesign matter, especially using system design principles? We also look at blockchain arbitration and Claros, which is a very interesting case study. Colin and I have written about that before with smart contracts, and it continues to evolve. And so it's another really interesting case study in what Federico Ast has created there in South America. Mass arbitration, that's another case study, which is certainly really powered by AI, and technology plays a very large part in what has made mass arbitration possible. Then we kind of bring everything together. So you've got your background, you've got your case studies, and then we provide the forward-looking, the future frameworks, ethical by design, and try to put everything that we have been discussing into focus for the future. How do we apply this in a world where the technology is always changing, right? So thinking through user-centric and ethical design, interdisciplinary collaboration, why it's so important in these times that we not have silos for law school versus computer science versus sociologists and psychologists. We all need to work together. Everyone needs to be at the table. Thinking through frameworks. Well, what kind of frameworks do we then create for fairness, accountability, and innovation within this ethical by design? And then, of course, flexibility, because things are changing by the moment, by the second. So the key takeaways, which of course I love these takeaways, but technology, it's not all good, it's not all bad, it's how you use it. Very cliche, but I still think it's very apropos. Ethical use is essential, and AI is not going away. I think we can all sort of attest to that. Finally, just kind of putting forth, key points and future considerations. And I wondered if Jan had anything else before we get to discussion that you wanted to add on this.
I guess the only other layer that that Amy and I discussed in the last chapters was thinking about how AI is able to adopt a thinking system. So if I asked chat 6 months ago, what do you think? And the answer was, I don't think. And but then a few months later, it turns out that you can ask chat to think slowly or quickly, in thinking fast and slow, resonating and thinking about what you can now select, whether you want a quick answer or if you want a medium thought through answer, or if you want a deeply considered answer. And when I asked chat, I said, what will you become in the future months. And it said we'll be able to do and not just mimic thinking. So I think that that really opens a whole conceptual universe that is going to be harder for us to name and organize and structure and communicate across all the professions that Amy mentioned.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and stop share and get into the discussion, which is kind of the good stuff.
Ask one question. This was a question that was asked of me a long, long time ago when I wrote a book that anticipated a lot of the things that the internet has become. And there was a question about whether I was optimistic or pessimistic about what I had written. And I thought to myself, well, I just wrote what was written. It wasn't optimistic or pessimistic. But of course it was. It was more optimistic than pessimistic. In other words, I didn't really anticipate social networks or antisocial networks. So I'm asking this question to you, Amy or Jan. Having written all of this, and being the people who understand more about this than I'm sure anybody, are you optimistic or pessimistic?
Do you want to go first, Jan, or should I? Or
Go ahead, Amy.
that's a great question. Neither. I guess for me, I
Awesome.
really, it's funny because I actually just had a conversation. I was talking about a different book concept with a colleague in Norway, and we were on a Zoom call talking about sort of AI and access to justice. Do we think it's going to help or do we think it's going to hurt? And then it also made me think about there's been on the Access to Justice listserv a really robust discussion around exactly that question. Is it good or is it bad? And both of us kind of decided neither in the sense that it can be good and it can be bad. So it's not sort of an absolute yes or no, it's more a how. And I feel as though how you engage, how you use the AI, how you use the technology becomes even more important. And so in my view, it's like a very nuanced, some days I feel really like pessimistic, other days I feel really optimistic. And I think it's because I think it depends on how it's used.
And I think on that last point, uh, I think not so much positive or negative because I'm not even sure that we can anticipate how it will be how this will be manifest in our lives, in the different people, in the effects. I mean, the world is in a complicated place in a lot of ways. So thinking if we can help people think about give them the tools to think about the state of the world and the state of resources. I think structuring the conversation in an open way is maybe our pathway.
Yes.
Carrie?
Yeah, Ethan, to answer your question, oh, first of all, let me just thank Jan and Amy. This book's terrific. I just finished a manuscript on advanced introduction to all of ADR, and I spent a chapter on AI. And I relied on what I could get from your book before I got it. So thank you. You've done a great service. I'll say a few words when I'm done about the ADR professors in our annual meeting. We just all met with our works in progress, and we actually spent a lot of time on AI. I don't think anybody on this current call was there, so I can say a few words about that if people are interested. But Ethan, to answer your question, we explored a lot of the pros and cons, and as Colin knows, I was a con ODR person for a very long time, and I am not anymore. I'll say why in a moment. But I raised my hand to tell you that many, many years ago, one of the best academic papers I ever heard as a scholar was from the film school at UCLA, and an art historian presented a paper on human uses of technology from the beginning. So I'm going to ask you, I do this to my classes now. For all of you, what is the first use of any advance in technology? So think printing press, film, TV, and now AI. What's the first use that humans make of a new technology? Does anybody know what that is? Pornography.
Mhm.
Cave paintings, first time pictures of humans writing and making pictures. People think when you say printing press, they think of the Gutenberg Bible. No, very wealthy people were able to commission prints of, Kama Sutra-like things and other things. So when people ask that question, positive or negative, my answer from that paper, which I guess people are going to ask me for, and I can't, it's not on my current computer. Human beings are very resilient and very creative, and every use of technology has had both pluses and minuses. So I agree with Amy. I say neither. I say on the one hand, on the other hand. Most of you on this call who know me know I'm an ethicist, and I've spent a lot of time creating a lot of soft law regulations. Thank you, Leah, for everything you've done. And I'm very, very skeptical that all the soft law and the principles and the ethical codes that we on this call spend so much time drafting are going to actually be able to cabin all of this. And so, to Colin and Ethan, let me tell you that skeptic here, I'm still prohibiting AI in my class. And I told my class yesterday, it's prohibited. And if you think I can't figure it out, I know how to use it. You turn in a paper and I'm going to run it through every one of the generative AIs to see where your, language comes from. On the other hand, I find myself using it every single day. I mean, just before I got on the call, I had to look up the meaning of an Irish Gaelic word for something that I was working on. And whoop, there it came in 2 seconds, very accurate, with a whole bunch of different choices, not a single answer. So that's an example of thinking, not, both fast and in the middle. It gave me a very quick answer. Then if I kept digging deeper, it actually elaborated on etymology and a whole bunch of other things. So, for those of you who know, past ODR fora, when I occasionally got up and did my, negative song and dance, I don't think that anymore. I worry a lot as a professor, as a teacher, about what it's doing to our students. And that is a negative, Ethan. It is. Teaching in law schools, it is clearly eclipsing the kind of critical thinking that gets done when you can't look things up right away. So the other side of that is that my law students report that law firms are making them use AI because it reduces billable hours. Now, you would think that's ridiculous. Don't law firms want to have high billable hours so they can bill more? But the law firms want to promise to their clients efficiency. So, end of this speech, I can say more if you want. The countervailing pulls are really that's what's interesting to me, Ethan's question. It's neither good nor bad, it's human. And humans are good and bad too. I don't have to tell anybody on this call. We're seeing a great display of that in the world. So, thank you guys so much. This book is so important. And it just gets us, to be able to talk about these things. My only pessimism, Ethan, is that I'm really skeptical we're going to be able to cabin any of this. As Jan has said, this is evolving every minute. I mean, I check things almost every other day, and it gets better and better, the AI. It also makes a lot of mistakes. Let me give you one quick example, then I promise I will, shut up. My husband ran my name through AI and asked, what is Carrie Menkel-Meadows' research about? And it produced, because I write in a lot of fields, some of you know that, it produced an incredibly rich, diverse description of my scholarly work, better than all my websites and better than any bio that anybody ever wrote of me. I said, wow, this is amazing. And then he said, what has she written? I've written over 250 articles and 25 books, or edited them. Not a single citation was correct or accurate. Same question, same ChatGPT version. So the bio was totally accurate, and it did hallucinations. So it said I wrote a book, Feminism and Mediation. I've never done any such thing. What did it do? It put together my feminist work with my media. So I tell all of you, when you get off this call, try a couple of questions and examples. It's a nice way. I do something different every day to measure the progress that's being made, to be both accurate, but also to show how sometimes it is inaccurate, and that's just research one-on-one. So I haven't actually said much about dispute resolution here. So I'll be quiet, let somebody else ask some questions, and we can return to the DR parts, if we have some more time. Thank you guys, really. I just want to say thank you for this.
Thank you,
And
Carrie.
Leah too. And Leah too.
Leah, who's looking at the chat, are there any questions that people have asked?
There's no questions, but there's been some thank yous. There's also been some sharing of some resources. So I point people to take a look at them if they'd like. And I will again put the announcement of where you can find access to buy their fantastic book.
I see Ellen has her hand up.
Amy, hi Jan. Thank you very much for your presentation and your book, and obviously in-depth efforts in this area. Quick question. So the title talks about dispute resolution and prevention, and I noticed the case studies, at least the ones that were on the slide, seem to be about resolution. Do you have any case studies that are devoted to, the use of technology to kind of catch friction while it's small, prevent conflicts from escalating, that sort of?
No, that's a great question, and it's something that we really took to heart. We really want to think about it from a prevention standpoint. I can say, even in real time with Justice Tech, my students are creating systems really focused on prevention in a lot of situations using AI and other technologies. And one of the case studies with the co-parenting apps, a lot of the co-parenting technologies that have been created are to prevent those co-parents from ending up back in court or ending up in a conflict. So it is trying to stop it from escalating through better communication, more fluid communication, not together in the same room, because being together in the same room can flare up conflict, right? So it turns out family is actually one of the really most ripe areas. Leah and I actually wrote an article about family ODR many years ago. Remember that? That was really important even back then. And I remember Colin and I having a conversation with New Handshake about, well, e-commerce, certainly that makes sense, but ODR with family cases? No, that's, you need to be in person. And then we both realized, well, no, actually, this is an area that's really right for it. And even this semester, my students are working on 2 different projects with Action for Children, really focused on creating technologies to help prevent conflict in the family space. So I say that's one example. Jan, I know you have some others in the environmental space too.
And I think both in terms of communication and information, those are essentially prevention if people are more equipped. So I'm working in looking at the use of professional facilitation in groundwater management in California. And so that's all about information. Larry Suskind's work on in this area in multi-party and public policy negotiations, in really intervening. If you bring the right parties together and give them access to information, they can do joint problem solving, which is essentially preventative.
Question?
I think I see
Yeah.
Leah.
Congratulations. This is a amazing part 2 to Jan and her colleagues' dispute system design book, and so urgently needed. So thank you both for bringing your expertise to the table. I think it's a major contribution to our field. And with ending with that phrase, I want to invite you to broaden this out and say, since technology is being used in all sectors of society now, in all societies, many sectors use it and don't think of it as dispute resolution, like businesses that think about it as customer service or the like. And yet they're solving and sometimes preventing problems all the time. And so I guess I invite you to share with us your view about where the system design perspective fits that's connected to other disciplines or other practices besides court, mediation, arbitration, facilitation. And any thoughts?
Yes, thank you. In fact, we even include sort of systems thinking more broadly with Sengi and others that have really thought about this sort of systems thinking and how it fits in to HR, to business, to public affairs, to government work. And we really hope that this could be used in whole or in part in a lot of different types of classes, not necessarily just in law school at all, by any means. In fact, we welcome other uses. That sort of thinking and helping to provide that kind of foundational guidance and foundational way to really analyze this crazy world and the crazy technologies that keep coming up and how it fits into what you're doing. I think about here at Ohio State, we use Workday, which I say you have to work all day to deal with Workday. They didn't think about system design at all. Is anyone on the call using Workday? It's a nightmare. And I wonder to myself, that's a perfect example where they're using a technology for HR management of conflict and preventing and resolving problems that you might have in the workplace, but instead it's creating conflict because it's so poorly designed. So I wish they would have used these sorts of system design principles. And also, we think that the book could just be used because it is digital first, it's very easy to only use like 1 or 2 chapters or 3 chapters. And we give some guidance on that in the teaching materials along with additional exercises. And Jan, maybe you want to add more to that too.
Uh, I think you touched on the challenge. Colin talked about this some years ago. People, we like to talk about conflict resolution, but nobody else cares about conflict resolution. They just think about selling more stuff or selling more services. And so our naming, how we name what we do, I think is a real barrier to its application and meaningfulness to people who can actually use the principles that we're talking about.
That that really that really resonates. And I was thinking about how I think the phrase ODR, online dispute resolution, had such currency and was so incredibly important at the beginning. And now, frankly, with COVID hitting and virtually every dispute resolver with access to technology, to the internet, needing to get on to video conferencing for 18 months or so, we've all been exposed to ODR, right? So anytime we're using technology, we're engaged in what the subfield of the field calls ODR. And so the terminology can open doors and close doors. I appreciate what you're saying, Jan. I also want to note that Ben just shared questions in the chat. If I could raise that up, is that all right?
Go ahead.
So 2 questions. Does a revolution in AI tend to operate the same way as every other evolution to support the status quo dominations? See IBM and the Holocaust, card punch technology, Palantir targeting decisions with humans out of the loop. Second question, does dispute system design goals address the type of items seen in disputes, like suppression of rebellion or dissent? Thanks, I mull. From Ben Davis, these questions.
Great. Yeah. Hey, Ben, how are you? It's good to see
Thanks,
your name
Ben.
there. Lots of thoughts there. This is a great question. It's a complicated one. I was listening to an NPR, and now I forget the name of the gentleman that was being interviewed, but it was actually very interesting just about how he's afraid that AI will take over the world in a very negative way, mainly because people with money and power will use it for ill instead of good. And sort of back to Carrie's point, how do we sort of cabin this and how do we stop that from happening? I don't know. I mean, I think that it's complicated, right? I'm always hoping that the counter revolution, that there's enough people on the ground who are thinking deeply about how can we actually help solve problems? How can we cure cancer? How can we use AI for things that really help society instead of hurt society? I always have to think that way, or else I'll just like be fetal position in the corner all day long. So I have to try to think about the ways you can still have a counter revolution. But I do worry about that because there's so much money involved. I loved Carrie's question about pornography, and in my head right away I'm like, well, to make money. That's what people do, right? If we really think about sort of the VCs and we think about who's getting out there with AI, oftentimes it's to make money and not to really think about it in ways that are for good. So how do you sort of address that and work toward good? And that can be sometimes an uphill battle, but I think a battle worth fighting, in my opinion.
Ask another question then. My
Uh,
perception is that innovation is increasing and increasing faster than any responses that we have.
I got my hand up. Is that okay, Leah? And then Colin does too. Is that okay?
Robert too. Yeah.
Yeah. So two quick comments just to follow up on what you guys said. Yesterday, I heard an ad for a company that was promoting the use of AI for HR use. This is about labeling and naming and uses. And, I feel like I'm going to crash my car when I'm listening to this stuff in the car. The advertisement said, get rid of those mundane tasks in managing people. Turn it over to AI and be more efficient. Um, and for those of us that still remain people to people, I just thought, what a way to frame and to sell this stuff, that managing people is a mundane task. Now, it can be very painful, tedious, HR conflicts are really tough. But so while we're on this call, those of you listen to ads, watch how people are promoting these services. As Jan said, how are they being labeled? As Amy said, it's all for money. If you haven't read it, I recommend to everybody Careless People, which is the story of what Zuckerberg and Sheryl did to Facebook and the pursuit of profit above all else and the basic loss of any original goals and ethical designs of Facebook. I really recommend it. Apparently, the author, from an arbitration, has been banned from promoting her own book because Facebook Meta sued her. I assume there's an NDA there somewhere. But if you want to see an example of starting with good goals, system design, Jan, and how it got perverted by the search for profit, that's one of them. So, this is just for everybody to listen to how this stuff's getting promoted. I found that very telling, that HR is so mundane, we're going to turn it over to AI, and that's going to take care of the problems of people. Colin.
And I think that might have been Workday, and I'm not kidding, because I heard an ad for Workday.
You heard it? Okay.
Well, Carrie, you're the mother of ADR. I love everything that you say, but I can't help but slot back into the exact same response that I had even 10 years ago when we had this dialogue, for this conversation to turn into, well, AI, what is happening? And all these tech people are I think, I still have the instinctive response to say, this is happening. It's not about dispute resolution. It's not even about the law. It's about society writ large. And we are dispute resolvers working in the context of that society that's changing. So how do we update what we do in order to be relevant to the world we're moving into? Certainly we can stand to thwart these changes and say, I don't like this. This is bad. What's going on? This isn't the way legal education is supposed to work. This isn't the way this is the mediation I was trained in. But that said, it's happening. Now, what I will say, let me just start out by saying I'm totally biased because I love Jan and Amy so much, and I love this book so much. And I feel the same way that when I read Ethan and Janet's book, I could not talk about ODR. Before I read the book, I talked about ODR all the time. And then I read the book and I couldn't stop talking about fourth party because it clarified an idea that was so essential to what I was talking about. That terminology became an irreplaceable part of my vocabulary in describing it. And I feel that way about Jan and Amy's book. I just taught at Pepperdine this past weekend. We did an intensive. I probably said the word digital dispute systems design about 10 times because now that we have this concept and they've articulated it so clearly, I think it's going to be a foundational idea for us moving forward in the field. And I just think this is such a great achievement, and I'm so proud of the two of you. And I think it really does move the field forward in an important way. And anyone who cares about ODR needs to buy and read this book because we're all going to have these concepts in the work that we do moving forward. Now, again, responding to Carrie, and this is what I said, I posted my article, our back and forth, Carrie, that we did back in 2017, is ODR ADR. And I believed at the time that ODR is the future of ADR. And now I think that that has come to pass. I mean, we are doing studies of mediation in the United States, and upwards of 80% of these mediations are happening over technology. And it is almost impossible to find any mediation that's happening without some aspect of technology integrated into it. These are our friends here. This is the inside community of people who are thinking about this. Jeff and I built a platform together. I've marveled at Bob's platform. Nico has done incredible stuff with Redec. Nicola and the Cyber Justice Center have done amazing things building these platforms. We are on the front lines building and testing these systems. And just like Amy articulated her frustrations with Workday, it's not about where we are today. I go back to what Ethan said about innovation. When we first started doing ODR, we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have social networks. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have AI. All of these things have been added to the toolbox. And the question is, the goals have not changed. I still have Frank Sander on my wall because Frank's goals and my goals are the same. We just have new tools. And Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they do not engage in debates about is AI good or bad. They're born into a world where it's in the water. And there's going to be somebody at Google that invents an antenna that you can screw into your head, and suddenly you can just communicate your thoughts via Wi-Fi. You don't even have to say anything. And you know what? When that happens, there's going to be tons of people saying, this is good, this is bad. The younger generation is going to be excited about it. The older generation is going to be horrified. But we have to integrate it into what we do because society is moving forward. So for me, this framework, this DDSD framework, these are the essential questions that get to what Ben is raising. Is this good or is this bad for us? We still have the objective of providing fast and fair resolutions to people when they encounter disputes. And humans will always have disputes because our self-interests collide. But we have to use the tools at our disposal to try and achieve that objective. And these are powerful new tools. So that's why all of us together have to think about how do we civilize these technologies and put them to the task of time immemorial, which is delivering peace and helping people resolve their disputes. And that's why the framework's so important. Discussing whether or not AI is good or bad, to me, I feel like we could do that all day and all night, but it's happening. It is out the door, and it's not even ChatGPT anymore. Now it's agentic AI, and you have companies in Silicon Valley. You're right; they're laying off 10,000 people and creating 10,000 Claude code agents. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, we can argue that up and down, but it is happening, and it's not going to unhappen. We have gone through a one-way gate, and it's locked behind us. So that's why frameworks like what are presented in this book are so important, because that's the only way we can make sense of all these changes and figure out how to achieve the objectives we've all shared for years. So my 2 cents.
That sounds like a quarter or a nickel, not 2 cents.
Sorry. I can't restrain myself.
Whether.
No, it's always useful to hear what you have to say, Colin. You mentioned the fourth party. Let me say a word about that because it was a phrase that Janet and I came up with 25 years ago and sort of lay dormant for 15 or 20 years. And all of a sudden it appears in books like the one we're talking about today. And a couple of pages are devoted to it. And I don't know what the fourth party really means or what a value it adds.
I do. I'll send you an
It
email. I'll
does.
explain it to you. Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I don't know what it adds to the conversation to say technology is the fourth party. First of all, it assumes that there are three parties left.
Yes.
Actually, Ethan, I see your hand, Nicholas, but if you don't mind, just to jump back here, I think that's actually a deep point because if we end up having two chatbots negotiate, and humans are out of the loop in the negotiation, then do we have even two parties and it's a third party? Tech is acting as a third party. So I think, again, revisiting terminology is so helpful, but keeping the concept in general of the fourth of technology being a party, not just a location or not just a tool, but a party is very valuable. But having us revisit whether it's always the fourth is important. And in fact, I think now the idea of a fifth party being the LLM architects and the system designers is really crucial into the conversation. So sorry to just do that add on to Ethan's incredibly important point. Nicholas.
Thank you so much, Leah. And again, congratulations to Amy, to Janet for this wonderful work. I'm looking forward to having it here in Colombia at some point. But I think we're now getting into very good points. I think what Colin was saying was very thought-provoking. And to me, now that we're discussing the future of ODR, ADR, and artificial intelligence involved, my question is, as this fourth, fifth party evolves, and then we get more customized ODR platforms or ODR flows, will we get at some point having the AI building its own flow as the dispute is submitted? Will that be a possibility? Or would we have to rely on more common flows that will be more predictable to the actual human parties? So do you foresee a future where, whenever you start a dispute, you will have a customized flow made by AI and probably resolved by AI, or we will have to stick to more common patterns or approaches or flows that people can more easily work with. So I don't know, Amy, Janet, looking forward to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I actually think we are having more customized systems. I mean, you even think about GEMS, right, with Gemini, or some of these others where you already have AI creating contextualized really systems for individuals, whatever task it is that they're trying to do in their daily lives. I can even think about the system we're creating for school districts here in Ohio, which is to help them keep track of absenteeism and then flag absenteeism earlier and do it all without having a lot of time and effort when they don't have any resources at all. Like literally, if you've read the book Paper Girl, I strongly recommend it because we're working with that school district. And, you know, helping individuals who have no resources do more with less by creating a very contextualized flow specific to their process and helping it. And then of course, it's to help out with online mediation as well and to schedule those mediations. But to your question, I think agentic AI really opens up the ability for that, and it's really pretty exciting. But that said, I think that's where it is really important to have, very strict standards, strict audits, looking very deeply at how that's created, because you also don't want it to go rogue. Because certainly it can go rogue. It can be very wrong as well. So I think and I worry about that, and I'll let it go. But the other thing I actually worry about is a human plus machine. And I worry that as humans, we are lazy. And so when something looks good, we just let it go. And we maybe don't actually take the time and effort needed in order to be sure that it's right. And I worry very much about that. And so I think that sort of anchoring bias is very much a problem when you do have the AI creating the flow and it's all sort of AI built upon AI, and then you can have cascading failures, right? So I think I'm hoping that the fear of liability will help developers stay in line. That's actually like the biggest argument that I've been hearing from a lot of individuals is that fear of liability actually does help keep people a little bit more in line, but I don't know.
Robert has had a question, I think, for a while. Do you still have it? Did he leave? Bob Bergman? Oh, sorry, we lost him.
Can I make his comment in a different way? So here's a new phrase for you guys. Colin, get ready. Digital bias. Robert Bergman's comment was about something that I talk about a lot, and it's Ben's question too. Anchoring, I call it digital bias. AI is built on digital information, on statistical probabilistic numbers. It's a numeric way of coding and thinking about data. As some of you know, I've spent much of my life talking about human creativity in coming up with solutions to problems that are literally Stanford professor in engineering out of the box. And my problem with AI is the digital bias of knowledge already created in the box. And I put that in my book. It's a pun. I'm sure others have done it already. In the bots, BOT, BOX. It is within a self-enclosed system that keeps replicating itself and getting much more efficient with what there is. And maybe Colin or someone's going to tell me that hallucinations of putting data together that weren't originally together is one form of creativity. It could be, but it's also highly inaccurate. And what bots are not producing is new solutions to problems. And so for me, I've been calling it digital bias, or you can call it AI bias, or you can, but Robert's comment was about the fact that AI systems are based on digitized information, not on, I would say, conceptual information. Sorry, I didn't mean for that to be such a downer, but it's.
Oh, well, it opens a really large idea, and I'm just trying to get my head around that. I heard an NPR section about the people who live in the northern part of Canada, and how they live in the most harsh circumstance in the world. And over 10, 20,000 years, they have figured out how to stay alive and survive and well. And so what is that creativity that they have matched nature and human and physicality in some way? They have merged these in a problem-solving way that you're right, we're not really contemplating with our conversation here. So I think you're right. It's a wonderful thing to introduce and think what that might look like.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has been tremendous. Just what a great conversation and gift for today. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, Kyle.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations to the both of you.
And thanks for writing the forward, Colin,
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
and comments early on.
Thank you.